Vision. Following clues left by our ancestors, we unbury the past to reveal a knowledge of unfathomable value, putting us just a little closer to our own true birthrights. From the secret history of a possible bloodline of Jesus Christ, the secret history of America's founders, to the secret history of extraterrestrial interaction on our planet, here to bring light to the night. Your host for Night Vision Radio, Renee Barnett.
Hey everybody, welcome to Night Vision. So glad that you could join us, and I'm really happy to be here with you tonight. This show is almost like a respite for me. I don't know if you guys have been having a hectic week this week, but it seems like everything that could have broke down, and everything that could have messed up. And so it's been very, very hectic. And I've heard that from a lot of friends. I don't know where the planets are right now, but it seems like they're working against us this week. But it's such a nice thing to take time out and be here with you and talk about all these wonderful things that we love. And tonight we're going to be talking about one of my favorite places in the world, that mysterious little hilltop village of Rennes-le-Chateau in southern France. And there's a lot of mystery and a lot of legends surrounding that little village. And people have been trying to get to the bottom of it for ever since the tales started being spun. But they center largely around a priest that was there at the turn of the 20th century. And he apparently was doing some remodeling, digging under the church. He found something, some either treasure or some document, something of great import. And people have been speculating on it ever since. And there's all kinds of things that are involved in this mystery. And we're going to try to weed through some of those tonight, because our wonderful historian, James Martin, has been digging through the archives, and he's come up with some pretty notable facts that we can, and I'm talking about facts. I'm not talking about legend or speculation or conspiracies or stories. He's got it in black and white, and anyone who likes can go for themselves and find the same thing. But oddly, nobody has until now. So I'm really excited about that. So I would like to welcome the better half of Night Vision, James Martin, to the show. Hey, how are you?
Morning, all. I'm very
Morning.
good.
It's nighttime, baby. This is Night Vision.
It definitely is, and definitely feels like it today. And I've got to say, I echo your comments about this week. It's good to put this week behind us, I think.
I think so too. But you know what? I did just hear something, and I know this is completely off the subject, but pretty intriguing. And, speaking about conspiracies and stuff, but I'm not saying one way or another what I think is going on, but I'm just saying something very weird has been going on. I don't know if you've heard about it, James, but there have been, since the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, there have been very weird and mysterious deaths of a number of Russian oligarchs, not just within Russia, but in different places. I believe the latest one came out today, and it was an oligarch who was high up in, formerly in the Russian government, and they found him dead in his house in, I believe it was in Spain, along with his wife and children. And so they're saying it was a murder-suicide. But within 24 hours, there was another one, another oligarch, his wife, and his daughter. And then I think there's been a total of like 8 since the war began. And there's these multi-billionaire oligarchs. It just seems really weird. Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, I've heard of some attempts with poisoning and things like this, and some oligarchs who previously lived in the United Kingdom find themselves very ill all of a sudden. Who knows what's behind it? I don't cast any dispersions to particular world leaders, but who knows? I think we're in a very strange time anyway. We've gone through the upheaval with COVID, and I think that I think everyone around the world really feeling a little. I don't know. I think there's a desire for things to settle. But we do keep having bumps in the road. We keep having these strange weeks where, like you say, anything that can go wrong does. Or from my perspective, this week is blinked, and there's a mountain of paperwork to do and lots of work and all of this that normally you would just get through. But there's just been interruptions and setbacks and things like this. So it's strange.
Right. Well, I'm really excited, to get into tonight's show. And, as I told you off air, we've had a lot of interest in tonight. And I see someone in the chat room, Professor X, is saying, here we go, repeating all the myths again. I think I just said we're getting into facts, not myths, not conspiracy theories, not legends, not stories, but actual records and documents and historical fact. So that's what we're going to be covering tonight, Professor X and everyone. I hope you enjoy it. And so I think we should get right into it. Now, first of all, James, we haven't had a chance to talk very much, and I know you've shared some of this with me, but not everything. And what I would like to know is, how did this come about? Where did you go? Where did you start finding all these things?
Well, lots of various places, really. The Sauniere mystery, the Rennes-le-Chateau mystery, I have to be honest, I remember the first time I went to Rennes-le-Chateau, it was the story, the myth, actually a computer game based upon Holy Blood, Holy Grail had piqued my interest, Gabriel Knight. And I remember going to Rennes-le-Chateau and thinking, I'm going to be really upset, or it's going to be such a big moment for me, because it helped me get through some very dark times in my own life, this escapism. And I got there and couldn't figure out what the mystery was about. Not even a tear. But it is in the center of a whirlwind where there's a lot of mystery in the surrounding area. So really, where does the evidence come from? When you're researching Rennes-le-Chateau, when you're looking at Sauniere and you're looking at the various priests from the murder of Gellie to the mystery of the priest Bigu, or Bijou, however you wish to pronounce it, there's a lot of conjecture. I suppose it's a bit like Rosslyn Chapel in this way. There are those who believe that Rosslyn Chapel's a portal for aliens and UFOs and whatever else. But then on the other side of the spectrum, there's some harsh realities and facts behind it. And given my background, I suppose, facts are always the key to springboard from. So a lot of the information has been collected over years, and well, when you are working throughout the week, going through what you've taken in terms of pictures on your phone, from visits to some archives, etc., just takes a little bit of time to process and go through. And there is always, and are always, new bits of information that are released. And the reason I mentioned COVID at the top of the show, well, one thing that's happened around the world is a lot of archives in universities or council offices, local government, throughout COVID, they've been digitizing quite a lot of their archives. So it means accessing things is a little bit easier if you don't mind sending an email. So this is a mixture from the town of Limoux and Carcassonne and Toulouse. Coupled with this is one thing that we must do when we're looking at any period in history is not to look through history with our own eyes, but to try and put yourself into the situation and what was going on at the time, just so you can better understand why people did what they did, etc. It's not an admission that what they were doing is right. It's just from their context, it is important to try and understand. And that's really the approach. So the information that we're going to go through this evening is based upon that. It's not based upon their opinions.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a way, and I mean, not to put anyone else down that's done research in this area, unless it's, myself, is I guess it's rather two-dimensional to just look at, let's say, Berenger Sauniere and say, what was he doing, and what did he do, and where did he go, and where did he get all that money, and how much money was it really, and all that, without looking at what was going on, what was happening, politically and socially at that time. And when, you did reveal some of those things to me, and I started thinking about it in that context, it started making sense, and it started in maybe not solving anything necessarily yet for me, but putting the story a little bit further down the road, like revealing just a bit more. And I feel like that, this is kind of the tip of the iceberg, and that, the more that we dig, that the more that will be found out. I mean, because, I know this is not just a couple of visits to an archive that you've done. It's gone on over time, but you're not stopping. You're still doing it. So who knows what else is going to pop up next. But so, I start anywhere you want, because I'm not sure how far back you want to get started. Do you want to start with Sauniere and sort of go backwards and talk about those other influences that were before him?
Well, yeah, we can do. I mean, we could start off with the firstly the situation with the church itself. So the church is a very old church, and for someone who thinks something from the Tudor period is quite new, when I'm saying it's old, I mean it's quite old. I mean we're going back to the Carolingian period. We're going back to the 9th. An 8th century. I mean, it's the foundations of that church are very old indeed. But we're not going to go all that way back. I think perhaps we start off with Antoine Bigot or Bijou. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his surname, but he was the priest at the church of Rennes-le-Chateau. Before the French Revolution, and the French Revolution is going to be absolutely key to the story as we go on. So, just a little bit about Bigot. I mean, he's born April the 18th, 1719, in a place called Sauniere. Now, I remember when I first looked at this, and I thought, well, it would be, wouldn't it? Imagine trying to explain that. So, we're talking about Sauniere. And he's from a place called Sauniere. Sauniere is a lovely village. I've been. There's quite a few interesting buildings around there, including not too far away a Roman funerary pyre.
Oh, wow.
Which is, if you're discreet, you can go and have a good look at. But Bigot is from a family of priests. There seems to have been a notion that his dad or uncle, not dad, but uncles, and all of this were priests before him. So it's an ecclesiastical family. In other words, there's a tradition of priests, and that's not too unusual. The church, the old church in Rennes-le-Chateau, was in the grounds of a aristocratic family. So this was a private chapel attached to essentially a castle, if you will. So it's not too unusual that you would see families maintaining their post, and having some prominence and influence over the decades and centuries. This isn't too unusual, and this is really Berenger. He becomes the priest at Rennes-le-Chateau in 1774. His uncle was the priest starting in 1736. Just to give you a bit of an idea there. He'd obviously been to other towns and was a priest at a variety of other places. For example, there's a small village called Clat, where he was the priest. But essentially, 9th of November, 1774, he's up at Rennes-le-Chateau. So let's put things into context. We're in a period of time in French history. It's called the Ancien Regime, the old regime, essentially, whereby France is owned by the monarchy and it's owned by aristocratic families. And just to put things into context, we're not quite at the French Revolution yet, but on the ground in France, there is a lot of turbulence. There are people who are starving. There are people who are having to pay taxes to their local overlord, basically, the local duke, the lord, the person who actually not just owns the village, but to an extent owns you as a person. There's no freedom of vote, and you are expected to go to church. If not, you will be punished. That could be fines, or in the worst case, if you go to the wrong type of church, your head and shoulders go in separate ways, if you see what I'm saying. So in Rennes-le-Chateau, you've got an interesting family. They call it the Chateau Pool, and Pool, upper pool, basically, is what it means. The family there have a few interesting and eccentric characters, including someone who you may have heard of, Marie de Negre, or Marie de Negre d'Arblay, a fusion of names from two families. And certainly, as the revolution begins to approach, there are some very odd carvings that are put on her tombstones, plural, just to give you a bit of an idea. But as revolution begins, 1789, the people have had enough of the direct control of the monarchy, and when people are starving, generally separate research for my day-to-day job, but usually when 40% of people's income's going on food, plus ripe for revolution. So you've got let them eat cake, and then later Napoleon army marches on its stomach. Just to give you a bit of an idea, the people are coming, and they're coming for famously the monarchy, but they're also coming for the church, who are seen to be complicit in the reason that they're starving. So Berenger obviously has some idea that the revolution's coming because he flees. He moves into Spain. I do believe that a little bit of new evidence for him that he actually returned back to France and passed away at Collioure. So he's moved into Spain away from the revolutionaries who are after his head and that of any other priest, and he's going over the border into Spain. What he's done, though, is he's hidden a lot of the iconography, a lot of the wealth of that church, things like a gold cup, and no, not a grail, but gold cups and all of this. He's hidden it within the church itself. So this might allude to something like, I don't know, when Sauniere allegedly finds some treasures, it might just, in fact, be the stuff from the old pre-revolution church that he's rediscovered. But we will come on to that shortly. And that's Bigot in essence, where he links with the mystery, as I say, comes from the Marie de Negre, and you have some very unusual carvings on her gravestone. Et in Arcadia ego, for example. I'm also in Arcadia. Some very other strange things, perhaps even slabs that suggest the Templars were up there. There's no evidence for that, by the way. But it's very interesting. And he leaves, and the revolution. So there's a period of time where the church doesn't have a priest. It's essentially abandoned as the country is ripping itself apart under a revolution. So that's where we are with Bigot.
Bigot.
And we can certainly come back to him. But if we move ahead to the period of Sauniere, what you've got to bear in mind is France has gone through a revolution. 1789 really concludes at the end of the Napoleonic Wars in 1815. There's a restoration of the old monarchy. They're then removed in the 1821. Change of monarchy. They're removed then in another revolution, 1848. Napoleon's grandson, Napoleon III, is on the throne, and he then decides he's going to declare war on Prussia, and Prussia invades, occupies Versailles, takes Alsace-Lorraine, and he's deposed. And in this period, 1871, there's how can I phrase this? There's a period where no one's really sure whether there's going to be another monarch or a republic. It's very fluid, and as it happens, the Third Republic of France, the French Third Republic, is born in 1871. Really through a bit of chance. This wasn't meant to happen in this way. Now, if we put this into a context, if you've got many revolutions in 100 years, there are those who are in favour of the monarchy, and there are those who are really, really against the republic. But those who are in favour of the monarchy are either in favour of the pre-revolution family, or they're in favour of the Emperor Bonaparte, Napoleon Bonaparte. So essentially, that's the context. It's not just a case of, in the time of Sauniere, France is a very stable country. It's just gone through revolution again, and people's minds are very bitterly divided as to the future of France. Now, in Paris, they call this period the Belle Époque, the good times, essentially. The story's somewhat different in the rest of France.
Now, how does, when you started looking, the recent findings that you've had, when you were the things that you were telling me about before the show, were those things that you had already sort of discovered and were just now able to collate? Because I was thinking that there was something that you had just recently come across.
Yeah, recently, yes,
And
a
then
few.
you did you access these archives online, or did you actually go to Carcassonne?
Oh, this was an online trip. It wasn't a
And
trip
is
to.
that available to everyone, or is that only because you have those academic credentials?
No, this should be available to everyone. Archives are reopening, so the sense is if you email if you email the town of Limoux or Carcassonne, they're more likely to schedule you a visit than they are to send things over by email. As it happened, these were available online. That had the recent finding was actually from 1912, and this was Sauniere wanting to sell the house, the Villa Bethania, which was brand new for me because, like everyone else, when I first started to look at Sauniere, it was, he built the water tower. He paved the road up to the village. He was well loved by everyone.
Not
But as
quite
time
the
has gone on,
case.
that's absolutely not the case. So
I
that was
always
the.
have this, and it's totally, my own confection probably, but just from bits and things that I've gathered over the years, I always kind of had this this idea of Sauniere as being like someone who was kind of torn, or someone who was in anguish over something. And, maybe I'm making it too romantic, but that he was grappling with something, and probably that came from the idea that, he may have found something heretical underneath the church. And
Well,
so if
it's been.
it did contradict the doctrine, then, that might have been a struggle for him. But it's some of these things that you hear, they're just sort of second, third, 15th hand stories, because they're just things that have been bandied about, and you just kind of pick this little story up, and then sooner or later it becomes true in people's minds, that this is what happened. But on rare occasions, there are those opportunities, to get firsthand information, which is, certainly some of the documents that you've read and are privy to. But also, there are people still around that know some of the things that go on, that went on, or at least part of the story. People like Claire Corbu, or Claire Captier. Now, her father was the one who ultimately became the owner of Villa Britannia, or whatever the real name of that place really was. And there was a lady, and I won't give her name out. I don't know if she's still alive, but I was taken to visit her by Antoine Captier, and she's lived in Toulouse, and she was the so-called adopted daughter of Marie d'Arnaud, and she used to come and visit her there, and she said she would always bring Blanquette for Marie, because when she drank, she would talk and tell things. But one of the striking things that I remember from my visit with this lady was, there's that story about Marie out in the garden burning money, burning French francs or whatever the denomination was at that time. And, so I mentioned something about that to the lady, and she said, "Oh, no, it wasn't money." She said it was documents. And I said, "Oh my gosh." I said, "Don't you wish, that we had those documents?" And she says, "Oh, no. She said they were against the church."
Well, they could very well be. I mean, the conclusion that I think I'm going to get to, sorry to spoil the end, everyone, but is that whilst there's lots of stories about these burning documents, it might be evidence of treason that was being burnt.
Oh, but
Um,
well, what do you think she said it was against the church? Obviously, of course, my mind goes to, oh, I wonder what the secrets were, that would have brought the church down and all this stuff. But maybe it was nothing like that. Maybe it was things that were done in support of the church that would have gotten them in trouble, or I don't know.
I think it could very well be that it could very well have got the church into quite a bit of bother. Just a few things. No, the water tower at Rennes-le-Chateau most certainly wasn't built by Sauniere. Just remember the municipal workers who erected that. I think it was 1953. It was a while ago that I looked at that. And no, the road up there was paved by the municipality of I think Coisa back in the 20s. So
why would the village of Coisa have paid? Was that considered a part of Coisa?
Well, the only way to get up to Rennes-le-Chateau is through the village of Coisa. So it would make sense. I mean, the chances are it was likely a departmental investment that was just undertaken from Coisa, if that makes sense. But these stories are used to support and embellish Sauniere's wealth. Now, there is no doubt there was money somewhere, but I think when we're looking at where the money actually came from, we're dealing with quite a bit of corruption. We've got some receipts from really substantial donations to Sauniere's boss, which we'll go through shortly. And I'm not a convert to the notion that he was wealthy because of simony, reading out masses, because the going rate at the time, you would need the population of Europe threefold to really be able to afford a house and lots of modelling and taking over the market square. For
those who may not know, simony is basically paying the priest to, pray and get rid of your sins, and get you into heaven. And so that was where people purported that Sauniere's money came from. But there just wasn't enough of that for that to be.
I mean, indeed, and I think really the great mystery for me is not Sauniere, it's Bigot. I mean, just for those who are watching this, you've got a document which I think we should point out. This is from a document from Paul Sauce, but essentially says of Galilee. So de Galilee n'est point ici. So whoever it is of Galilee is not here. That's apparently found in the church from Bigot's time. So that for me is interesting. Why would you repeat it 7 times? Now it could just be he's teaching someone how to write, neatly. Who knows? But it's certainly very curious anyway. So Sauniere, now we're in this period of history where what I should say is what we're about to go through isn't designed as any insult to surviving family members or anything like this, but it is, and what I am going to talk through is based upon evidence as to what is going on at the time. Our cuddly, lovable Sauniere, I'm sorry, you're going to have to get off the bus at this stop, because the Sauniere that's getting on board is quite a nasty piece of work from my own perspective. Involving things like destroying water sources for the teacher, Prosperatio at the public school up there, the state-run school in the village, to refusing to put out a fire on Bastille Day. So when you read things like this, why would Sauniere refuse to put out a fire on Bastille Day? That's a very unusual thing to do. You could set the village on fire, essentially. So what was going on? So just a bit of context for Sauniere. Sauniere's father is essentially the manager of the estate of the Denegre and Darble families. And this involves many estates in the area. And all of these estates, by the way, the churches with these estates are the ones that Sauniere actually ended up being a priest at. So no change for him that he's up at Rennes-le-Chateau. There's probably a bit of nepotism going on here. But either way, as a member of the clergy, Sauniere is a very publicly known monarchist. He isn't a Republican, and in fact, he's essentially taking orders from the Pope, who is wanting the restoration of the French monarchy. Now, in a context where we're in a republic and there are elections, it should be at this point, I'll just give you an idea of it, the 1885 election results. And there are two factions, essentially, that are vying for control of the Republic. Now, when we say Republican, we're not referring to the American political party. We're referring to those who are pro-Republic. So you have three political parties that group together, a sort of coalition, if you will. The Democratic Union, the centre-left, and Independent Radicals. And in 1885, the elections held between the 4th and 18th of October, there are 323 members of the Assembly, members of Parliament, who are returned to the French legislature. There's another group, though, and these are essentially the pro-monarchists. And they're called the Union of the Right, l'Union de Droite, and they are comprised of royalists. These are people who want the Bourbon, not a drink, but the Bourbon
family.
Or the Orleanists. They want the old monarch back. They get 73 members of Parliament, essentially. The Bonapartistes, these are supporters of Napoleon Bonaparte's family. They get 65 seats. And the rest are general conservatives who receive 63 seats. So you've essentially got the radicals and socialists don't form into any group, but you've got a pro-Republican bloc, 323 seats, to the monarchist bloc, 201 seats. So why is any of this important for Sauniere?
Why indeed?
Well, he is after the restoration of the monarchy. And one of his first sermons from his new appointment at Rennes-le-Chateau essentially explains his position on everything. I'll just take an extract from Sauniere, and this is from the 11th of October, 1885. In other words, the election I've just referred to is ongoing between the 4th and the 18th. And now, it's difficult for us to understand today because we have election days. But if you imagine at the time, we haven't got the internet, we haven't got very quick vehicles. There's a lot of horse and carts, communications relatively slow, calculating and obtaining all of these votes from around the country, sending them to be counted, takes some time. So most countries around the world, if they have a democratic system at this period in time, run elections over either a few days or a few weeks. And midway through the election period, there's a second round of voting, basically. For those familiar with the Eurovision Song Contest, you'll know exactly what I'm referring to. But Sauniere reads this from the pulpit, and he aims it, quote, at the enemies of the church. Now, you can find this if you email me and Renee at info@newrennies.org. I can send you how to access this information. This very much is in the public domain. And he says the following from the pulpit: the victory is not yet complete. The ballot that's fixed for this Sunday, October the 18th, second round of voting, must ensure our triumph or deliver us yet to the keen enemies of the religion and fatherland, or of religion and fatherland. The moment is thus solemn and necessary for us to deploy all of our forces against our enemies. That is our great concern. Let us act, pray, change ourselves, make penitence, and perhaps we will obtain that this day, October the 18th, will become our day of delivery. He then goes further and asks directly the parishioners to vote for the union of the right or the monarchists. So that's very interesting. Why would you do that? If you're a parish priest, we think, well, you shouldn't really get involved in politics. We're meant to be in a secular republic, and here lies the problem. The Pope has decreed that the church should do, and priests should do everything they can to bring an end to this essentially heathen republic and to restore the monarchy to its
I'm assuming that, there was already at that time separation of church and state.
Yeah, as we're in the French Republic, there is, we're not at the period where the church estates have been taken over by the state, but there is a minister for religion who is in control of the church in France. It's a secular republic, in other words. You shouldn't really be getting involved in telling people who to vote for. And either way, if you're giving a sermon, it might be an idea not to do that anyway, should you, I don't know, spoil your flock. That the idea is messages from the Bible, I think, with, for those who attend churches and all of that, very much the same back then. Why would you divide people? But this isn't the first time that Sauniere...
Why indeed? It's happening today.
Quite. But this isn't the first time that Sauniere is reading sermons like this. It's never ending. There's 40, 50 sermons that are freely available where he does exactly what he's done in this one ahead of the vote, which is...
I'm sorry. Why do you think he took that stance? What was in it for him, do you think? I mean, what was his stance on it? What was supposed to be better? And did he really feel that way, or was he being funded?
Well, if we go back to Bigu's time, before the big revolution, the one that everyone talks about, the France was divided into three estates. You had the monarch, Louis XIV, I am the state, he very famously says. The second estate is then the lords, dukes, earls, the aristocracy, in other words, who control the country. And the third estate is made up of essentially religion. Now, okay, there's another estate as well, which is the representatives of the people. But let's face it, they're outvoted by the monarch, the aristocrats, and the religious officials. So what's in it for Sauniere, 100 years later? Well, if the monarchy is restored, so will the rightful place of the church. In other words, there is power involved by having a monarchy restored to France. The church and state are entwined. It means that the priests are no longer an optional visit or considered as enemies of the state in this new republican idea, but instead they're central essentially to the decision.
They're agents of the state.
Yeah, and if you look in the UK, for example, the UK House of Lords has bishops still deciding laws for the country. It's very unusual for a democracy, isn't it?
It is. It is.
But essentially, this is what we've got. And on the 30th of October, let's introduce someone who, when you look at the Rennes-le-Chateau mystery, now needs to be part and parcel of the itinerary.
I know who's coming.
Drum roll. Is someone called Monsignor Billard, and he is the Bishop of Carcassonne. Now, in other words, he's Sauniere's boss. He too has a vested interest in the restoration of the monarchy, and it's on the 30th of October 1885.
1885.
He receives a complaint from the Minister of Religion relating to the, quote, reprehensible or damaging behaviour of 4 priests during the election in 1885, and asked them to be removed from their positions. Now, on the 15th of November, Billard responds essentially saying that Sauniere had no intention of attacking the government, but had the right, as the defender of religion, to, quote, give advice to the voters of his parish in the presence of a anti-Christian program being offered by some of the candidates. And there is a newspaper for priests, shall we say, based out of Narbonne, which is, I think, La Semaine, I think they called it, which Sauniere writes for. And he issues, if you can't be bothered to, write your own sermon and you're a priest, then fear not, call Sauniere now on. He issues in this newsletter for priests mocked up sermons. Here's what you can say. If we all say the same thing, we'll eventually win. So we've got written evidence of Sauniere's complicity. Essentially, if you think of it in this way, he is delivering sermons against the state. Now, in some countries, this is known as treason. And it gets a lot worse for Sauniere. Sauniere is vehemently against any Republican. And there's been some suggestion, I would say, in recent times that there's been a link between Sauniere and the Habsburg family. There might be something in that. For example, other monarchies in Europe at the time include Spain, Portugal, Austria-Hungary, Germany, the British Empire, Italy. In fact, France is a rarity. France is a republic surrounded by monarchies. So there's some vested interest from other countries to restore a monarchy as well. It's fit into the alliance system, essentially, in Europe. So it wouldn't surprise me too much if the Habsburgs were really interested in rocking the boat, shall we say, for the French Republic. Of course, the Austrians had a mixed history, shall we say, with previous republics in France, including Bonaparte, for that matter.
Well, yeah, the Habsburgs did come to the region. and they did visit Sauniere. I had an exchange, a letter exchange with Karl von Habsburg, who's the current head of the Habsburg family after his father passed away a few years ago, Otto. And I asked him, why his grandfather had gone to Rennes-le-Chateau to visit with Sauniere. And he said that he had gone to that region to study irrigation methods. And I thought, okay, this king basically is going to go and study irrigation. I think not. But that was kind of funny.
No, well, what's in it for the Habsburgs is, a friendly. You see, the monarchies of Europe don't want to support a republic because that would be an end for them, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Their own people might think, well, do you know what? Well, we should rise up actually and get rid of you. And that happened across Europe in 1848. By the way, there was this major famine. Food shortages that led to major revolutions in practically all countries in Europe. So all of this is really much in the heads. Now, what you can't have is a government actively funding a priest or any political party, because that would be a declaration of war, essentially. That would be what's called a casus belli, a cause for war. But it doesn't stop aristocrats from making substantial donations. The French Republic actually issued a decree that called for any pretenders to the French throne to be removed with essentially 2 weeks' notice, to be removed from the territory of France. That included the African colonies as well as the French mainland. So they were given a very short period of time to get out of the country. So there's a lot of wives for these aristocrats and family members who are left in France, if that makes sense. And so just to whet everyone's appetite, let's talk about one of those wealthy pro-monarchy widows. And let's just consider, we haven't discussed the building of the remodeling, I should say, of the church. We've not spoke about the building of the Villa Bethania, which was never called the Villa Bethania for that matter. It was called the Villa de Marie. We haven't spoke about how Sauniere hoodwinks the village of Rennes-le-Chateau, steals the marketplace, the old marketplace, and turns it into the garden. Well, recommend a visit, and the menu's good. Food's excellent.
Which, by the way, it is the best restaurant in the entire region, I have to say, up there, right in that garden. So.
But
everything has a silver lining.
Where does all of this money come from? Well, our friend, the Bishop of Carcassonne. The Bishop of Carcassonne receives 1,200,000 francs, not in his capacity as bishop, but in a private capacity. It's very suspicious, here, from someone called, let's give her a full name, Madame Rose Denise Marguerite Victorine Sabatier, to give her full name. There's probably a few missing middle names in there. But she is an anti-Republican, and she's wanting to promote pro-monarchist forces. So that's 1,200,000 francs back in the 1880s, 90s. That's quite a few £1 million today. And what for? Why would you do that if you don't think you're going to get some return for your money? Is it? I mean, it could be. That's a hell of a lot of money to get someone to pray for your sins, especially when the going rates, something like £1 a day. Let's say. What was the money for? We begin to get a few clues as we begin to dig a little bit further into this. Lots of donations to that priest, lots of donations to the bishop, and lots of very interesting stuff to come up.
Wow. Well, we're coming up onto the break here in just a moment, so this looks like it might be a good stopping point. But there's so many layers to this story. It's just unbelievable. And so many stories, about this whole mystery. And, I can think of a million things to bring up, the water tower and not allowing them to use the water when the village was on fire, and things that Marie Denarnaud said and did. There's just so many little things, but the idea about the monarchy. I go back and forth. There's something very, kind of romantic about, having royalty and seeing the gowns and the pomp and circumstance and everything. But really, I read an article just this week that was sort of speculating that we could be close to the end of the British monarchy. And that, it was, they were asking the question, is it, really serving any purpose anymore and all that. And I thought, it's really such a throwback to a time when, you were just handed something, no matter what kind of scoundrel you were, and what kind of idiot you were, you could be king just simply because of your birthright. And
I have to say, I wonder for our friends who removed the monarchy in a little spat called the American Revolution, how you would feel if you were when you receive your paycheck, when you have a look at where your taxes go, how you'd feel about I got paid yesterday, and the Queen has taken 3 pence for every pound I earn.
Oh, she needs it. And it's a birthday gift. So I think we better cut it right here and take a quick break. And when we come back, more on Rennes-le-Chateau, Berenger, Sauniere, and his cohorts. Treason! Ah!
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Scrolling all day, time can disappear. Wanna make it count? Why not volunteer?
Posting pics of your food, that takes up time. Time, you've got time to binge all of season 9, though it got so bad.
Time, you got time. We're gonna grow back and be the same browse you had.
Just a few hours to keep families from harm. Help us end home fires with Sound the Alarm.
Volunteer for a day to install free smoke alarms in your community.
Discover the Observation Deck, a one-of-a-kind virtual event platform that takes video conferencing to the next level by using avatars to navigate a campus. There's so many areas and activities to choose from. There's a 1,000-seat auditorium, an expo hall, a nightclub, and even a beach. So come attend a conference, take a class, or hear a lecture on the incredible Observation Deck campus. Go to theobservationdk.com.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
Welcome back to Night Vision. I'm your host, Renee Barnett, and with me is our beloved historian, James Martin, who's been edifying us with some new information that he's come across largely about Berenger Sauniere, but also including the people that were around him and the people that preceded him. But so let's get into the treachery.
The treachery, yes. And for this, we need to just skip ahead, really, to 1889. There's another election. And we've got more sermons. We haven't got time to read through all of Sauniere's sermons. We'd be here for quite a while. And they are full of quite a lot of bitter vitriol about the Republicans. Let's just put it that way.
Did you say 1899?
1889.
1889. So
4 years.
The Gelli murder had already occurred, right? I think that was 1885, I want to say.
It was around the period of the Ripper murders, wasn't it? So it's around about this
it
period.
Was. You're absolutely right. And for the audience, Abbe Gelli was another priest in a neighboring village called Custassa, and he was found mysteriously murdered with an axe, I believe, and he was involved with Sauniere. Now, do you think that what you're talking about here and getting ready to talk about had something to do with that murder as well?
Certainly, when you look at the newspapers at the time, they are essentially, they propose that the murder is, so there's two newspapers that report on this, that the murder is actually was undertaken by pro-Republican forces. The priests in this area were known monarchists. They were actively giving sermons against the country, against the government. So two of the newspapers, local newspapers, they're no longer in circulation. But again, if you want me to send you over clips, I've not put any images together, quite simply because they're in French and very difficult to see on a screen. And I appreciate there's a lot of people listening, not watching as well. But again, if you want to have a look, what you will find is that the explanation is these are pro-Republican radicals. Now, whether or not that's true, whether or not that fits in with the bishop and the priest's political views is something else. I don't know. Will we ever find out? Probably not. Who killed Gelli?
Now, we had Colin Taylor, our friend Colin Taylor, who is a retired homicide detective with Scotland Yard and London Metropolitan Police. And he did a cold case investigation of the Gelli murder. And he felt that Sauniere was implicated. Now,
we've got lots of money that is being donated privately. And this is trackable. Not quite receipts, but near enough. The Bishop of Carcassonne is receiving, about 2 million francs just by this period. And what for? I'll give you, another idea as to what's happening here. In 1887, so we just go back a little. The altar at the church in Rennes-le-Chateau is donated by another pro-monarchist, Marie Cavalier. And she actually published a book of poems, royalist poems, in 1874 called the Fleur de Lis. You've got lots of donations coming from monarchists. Now, like I say, I'm not suggesting, by the way, that there's something bad about monarchism or anything like that.
I think I am. I'm not sure.
I have my own views, but it's important for me to go, right, I have my own, I'm a Republican. I have my own view. It shouldn't taint what I'm looking at, though. It shouldn't taint my my opinion. So I'm just trying to divert away from my own opinion. But there's lots of donations. Look, we've got a lot of money flowing around in private hands. The French government, by the way, is investigating this. Sauniere actually is a little later in the story. He's asked to produce financial records, tax declarations, effectively, and refuses to do so. I'll give you a little tidbit. Sauniere's father passes away, and his mother, as very typical at this time, the father would go to work, and the mother or the wife would remain at home keeping house. It's a very patriarchal society at this period. Women don't have the right to vote, for example. Across a lot of the democracies, there's lots of issues that we would take today. So how does she survive? Well, there's a right, essentially, a blood right, if you will, that says that children should support. I mean, Sauniere's mum has to go to the sub-prefecture of Limoux, a court case, because she's asked for some support from Sauniere, and he says, no, I'm not giving you anything. Now,
I would love to know the backstory of their relationship.
Me too. That, unfortunately, is maybe it will surface, but I would love to. There's clearly a problem there. But, the court finds against Sauniere and says you need to give her a stipend. I think it's something like 4 francs a week. Now, look, we're talking about lots of money sloshing around Rennes-le-Chateau, and certainly in the bishopric generally. So, it's pocket money, essentially. Just after that case, this is where Sauniere begins to move his entire estate into the name of Marie de Narnaud.
Oh.
In other words, you can't come to me for any more money because I don't have it. And we know he did this. With the Villa de Marie or Bethania later on. There are other things that are intriguing. Just how much Sauniere, when he.
But basically, what you're saying is that he was forced by the courts to help out his poor old mom.
Yeah, this wasn't a voluntary. Now, whatever we think, we're going to speculate about what was going on between him and his mom, but there's a picture beginning to develop about Sauniere's priorities in life. We've got issues like he's refusing to pay bills for remodeling the church, or having to pay back later, or set up installment plans and then reneging on them, and things like this. It doesn't give me a very good impression of someone. He builds, he asked permission to build basically a sort of hut over a water source, and the village of Rennes-le-Chateau, the municipal council says you can, but you can't put a roof over it because we might need access to the water. Well, he just ignores that and builds anyway. So when there is a fire on Bastille Day, you're not using my water. Now, Bastille Day is interesting because it's called the Fête Nationale. It's the celebration of the birth of the French Republic. And I can't help but think that the reason he refused to assist his parishioners, the village, is because of this, well, let the Republic burn. In fact, it might also be the case, and this was speculated very early on. Just remember, Rennes-le-Chateau is an unheard of village. There's no tourists going there. I mean, the first demonstrable bit of postcard advertising to go up to Rennes-le-Chateau to look at the views, there's no mention of any mysteries or priests or anything, is in the 1911, 1912 period. But there is a comment that's intriguing, and this brings another dimension to it, that if you go into the church and you see the Asmodeus, the destroyer, the devil, or, whatever you want to call it.
There's a baptismal font next to the door as you walk into the church, and it's a statue of the devil or a demon or...
A bit of an odd place to get baptized right near the door.
Yeah.
But hey, just above it is, of course, depictions of angels, lots of heavy symbology here. You can speculate as well that there's a bit of Martinist or Masonic symbology there too, pro-monarchist, but they're displaying the signs of the cross. If you have a good look, though, it might be that the demon is representing the Republic, with the divine right of kings, the bloodline of David, whatever, that in fact above it is a representation of the monarchy. And that has been discussed for quite some time. But it just adds a little bit more to what's going on here.
Yeah.
Now, what we need to discuss is someone called George Baker.
George
of course,
Baker.
That's not his name. It's Georges Boulanger.
Boulanger. George Bread.
Essentially.
Bread maker.
Now, Sauniere's essentially been 22nd of June 1886. Head of French royal houses must depart from French soil. And that act wasn't repealed until the 24th of June 1950.
Wow.
Sauniere is essentially, at this point, suspended from his duties due to anti-government ministering and all of this. He's reinstated, I think, in 1886. But both he and the bishop have become supporters of a general, Berenger. Berenger fought in the Franco-Prussian War. Essentially, we would refer to him today as a proto-fascist. And he's developed this interesting idea. He's an anti-Semite, but he's developed this idea of the stab in the back. The reason that we lost the Franco-Prussian War is because of the impure. It's not just the Republicans; it's Jews. It's people who are against the traditional values. And he says he's going to run for Parliament on the monarchist ticket. And in what can only be described as a huge seed change, he is elected, but he's elected for central Paris, the heart of the French government. Now, 1889's results generally, you've got you've got the Republicans and the monarchists, but you'll notice by now the names change slightly. You have an anti-Boulangist. These are people who are standing for their own parties, but they're fighting against Berenger. They win 354 seats to the Boulangists, essentially the monarchists, and the League of Patriots. They get 212 votes, 212 seats. So the Republic's secure in a way, at least electorally. But Berenger is a general, you see, and he doesn't quite stop there. So he has obtained, Berenger is elected in Paris, as I say, and he talks about peace and stability very intriguingly, and openly discusses his thanks for the clergy who's intervened more openly in this election than before. And he moves on in March of that year. He says something interesting. He says, "No one among any conservative that follows me or monarchist who follows me does me the insult of saying that I support the Republic in order to betray it." In other words, he is saying, I don't support the Republic, so how can I betray it? Mm-hmm. And it shouldn't come as any surprise. He attempts a coup.
Oh.
Now, previously...
Nothing new under the sun.
No. He's previously been the Minister of War, but I wouldn't call it a coup. I'd call it a chicken coup, to be honest with you, because he has support from even Winston Churchill's mother, of all people. Wow. But he is organising a uprising against the Republic to forcibly restore the monarchy. This has the full backing of not just the Pope, a bit quietly, but of Sauniere. For sure, there are sermons where he is speaking about you should vote for the Berengers. The bishop is saying this. There are many others. We're just focusing on our sort of area of France. And he is attempting a coup. Fortunately, I suppose, for the French state, they're already investigating. They're on to him. And Berenger, does he go through with a coup? Trying to forcibly seize the government? No, he runs away to Belgium. He's then tried in absentia. If he enters France again, he will be subject to an execution. Wow. And he spends the rest of his life in Belgium and he, like I say, he's arrested. He's tried in absentia for conspiracy and treason. Wow. So this is, again, let's just consider this. There is a bitter divide in France. I suppose in Britain you have Brexit, which still divides views. It certainly is bitter between those who want the old ways and those who are adopting more and more to the Republican ways. Of course, the French government then begins to clamp down on religious officials. So the Bishop of Carcassonne visits Sauniere, congratulates him for everything that he'd done for the election. And just after the election, the prefect of the Aude department, which is the county, if you will, in which Rennes-le-Chateau sits, warns the bishop that his priests are still engaging in anti-state activities. They've referred to various circulars and posters and flyers that have been distributed by the bishop. Sauniere is thanked by, well, actually, he ends up being the priest at another village as well, at Antignac. And it's shortly after this that, a few things begin to happen. There is a new political party called the Union of Christian France. Sauniere begins plans for the building and the takeover, essentially, of the heart of Rennes-le-Chateau. Now, let's pause here. Where did he get the money to do so? there'd been plenty of donations so far. A lot of the iconography found within the church is intriguing. Where did the money come from for that? Rennes-le-Chateau is, again, not tourist destination number one. Population 100, post twice a week maybe. It's off the beaten track. It's an effort to get there. It's 4 kilometers and basically directly up from the nearest small town again at this period called Coisa. We're not dealing with a huge town where there's lots of donations to the church, the Sunday school fund, the Sunday collection tin. We're not dealing with, here we go, here's a check for $1 million. We're dealing with donations from parishioners. And look, the village is bitterly divided. Half of them will not go to church with Sauniere there. They find that he's engaging in treasonable activity, essentially, and would rather trek elsewhere to confess, go to church, do whatever it is that they do. The schools in France have been taken over by the state too. And the schools, there is a...
Were the schools before under the control of the church?
To a limited degree. There really wasn't much by way of education for people during the time of the monarchy. So there's a drive to educate the people. So the school is established in Rennes-le-Chateau. It's not a private school. This is a state-run school, a Republican school. And the teacher there is someone called Prosperitio. And Sauniere has found his rival. He hates Prosperitio. Sauniere does things like he destroys the water tower, not the one that we might be familiar with, destroys the water tower for the school. Well, the kids have to go home. They won't learn about the Republic then. He starts writing, and I'd be interested for, I think you said Colin, the Scotland Yard detective.
Yes.
In a previous life, I worked at a bank and had to be able to check signatures and writing very quickly, accurately, to see if there's any forgeries or anything like that. Sauniere begins a letter writing campaign to the prefect at Limoux and of the Ord, complaining about the teacher, and says that these letters are sent anonymously to the prefect, I should say, on behalf of the villagers, including one that was allegedly written by the mayor. However, the prefect of the Ord recognises the handwriting of being one Marie de Narnaud.
Oh, wow.
So if we just get a little bit more of a picture of what's going on with Sauniere, I can't stress again how anti-Republican he is. Now...
And of course, when, you say Marie de Narnaud, we're talking about Sauniere's housekeeper, who was probably his lover as well, but we don't know that for a fact. Mm-hmm. But it seems like it. And she's also the one that he left all his assets to when he died. And I guess before he died, as you said, he put everything in her name anyway.
Well, the other curious thing about Sauniere is he's, in terms of money, quite a slippery character. He's borrowing money from people, sort of wealthy heiresses with very similar views to him. So, for example, there's in July, and I think it's the October, around about that time, in 1891, what you've got is a Marie Baltamy gives Sauniere 250 francs, and it's quite a bit of money at the time. And notes about his secret funds, 80 francs for the year. It's just very unusual. And it's in that year as well that he puts in his diary, letter received from Gran, discovered a tomb, it rained in the evening. You've then got, that was the 21st September, on the 29th of September, in his diary, he says, I saw the curé, the abbot, the priest of Nevian, went to see Joly, and then says, went to see Carrière, saw Crow and Secret. And a lot of discussion has been made about the word secret. I have to say, though, unfortunately, you read it and go, secret, oh, we've got somewhere. It actually means secretary. And even to this day, in shorthand, you find, in very brief diary notes, secret being shorthand for secretary anyway. So it...
who or what was Crow?
Crow was a priest. Crow, C-R-O-S. So I think his name is Guillaume Crow. I can't quite recall where he is, but he's part of this network anyway of pro-monarchist priest. Now, if we understand that backstory, then let's jump well ahead and start looking at. He was certainly money-wise. He didn't have a lot of cash to hand, but he certainly had a lot of assets. We know that he was trying to get out of the village. He was trying to sell up in 1912, and discovered actually a bit of correspondence between him and a representative of the Banque Petitjean in Paris. And he's saying, well, look, have you got any more news on the house sale? And the representative of the bank says, well, no, but what I would recommend is we start to advertise. And again, if anyone wants these images or needs information, please get in touch. We're quite happy to share this. And he says, but you'd need to advertise. It's going to be about 600 francs. I'll take 3% commission on the house sale, and that's how it works. Now, obviously, no one did buy the house, but it's not. If someone's harboring a deep secret, it's odd for you to sell the house. It is what I would say there.
Why? What do you mean?
Well, if he's selling the house and there's been some arguments that he's the custodian of some great secret of the church. Okay, fine. Well, why would you move house? Why would you sell house? What's the motivation for you to do so? I don't have an answer to it. It's just my attempt here is to just try and put a few things onto the record, if you will. And yeah, we can come back to the bishop, who's selling off church property, then bringing him back into ownership in his own name. There's lots of cases relating to Sauniere not filing taxes and then being investigated then by the state. The situation, electorally at least, is getting a bit more dire for those monarchists. They're losing support across the country as France begins to stabilise somewhat. So that was just an image from the 1893 election.
Was it largely the general public that really wanted the republic, and was it more the aristocracy and the royalty and nobility that wanted to obviously keep the monarchy?
Yeah, essentially that's exactly the situation. Now, obviously, you are going to have people who are working class who don't want the republic. Not everyone has the same opinion, but generally that's exactly right. Yes,
right. It would seem that way. Yeah, I mean, you see that strange dichotomy, all the time. You would think that the people would be for what was good for them, but someone's convinced them of the opposite. So I would imagine that would have held true then as well.
So he starts, he starts to really radically change the face of the village. Like I say, the market square is no longer there. He's come to an arrangement that for something like 360 days a year, he can essentially use the market square as he wishes. But, if there's any special events that he needs to forfeit it, he agrees to that and then ignores it. He installs a garden. He starts to remodel the church in the 1890s, hiring construction firms and then getting rid of them. So as soon as they discover something like, a tomb or some gold, shiny objects are found, which are probably the pre-Republican hidden stuff, they're sacked and replaced. So there's obviously some degree of trying to protect something. And my suggestion would be, perhaps we could go to some questions, but my suggestion would be, this church was a private church under the land of the Hopewell family. It was a private church. It would be more unusual if there wasn't, some sort of tomb underneath it. And we're not talking about, something grand or anything. It's just, where do you prepare bodies in a church, for burial? You're not going to do it, in public, are you? You would have this sort of passageway of the pilgrims, as it's called, underneath a church. My suggestion is whatever was found there is in that tomb, and I would strongly suggest that one of the things Sauniere did is, he built a wall surrounding the entrance to that underground tomb. So I think he was protecting essentially the aristocrats who are interred beneath the church, or at least, trying to protect their memory or something like that. But it's quite an expensive thing to build a mansion, change a church, take over a marketplace, turn it into a garden. Where did the money come from? This bit speculation, but if he was receiving private money from, Austrian royals, then it's certainly the case that at the outbreak of the First World War, he most certainly wouldn't be receiving anything from them. France was at war with Austria.
But why would the Austrian royals have been supporting him anyway? What would benefit them if the monarchy stayed in France?
So you've got an alliance. So if you think about it, you've got the Austrian and the German and the Turkish. All of those are royalist. They're not royalist. They are monarchies. Mm. So the alliance system in Europe is based upon which family is married into the other.
That's true. Yeah, of course.
Queen Victoria. World War I could be described as a family spat of Queen Victoria's family. But let's just keep in mind also that those royal houses in the 1800s are desperately, there's this fad in royal houses to try and prove your bloodline back to the House of David.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
It's in this period that circumcision in the British royal family begins. That there is this great tradition of, we go back to Jesus, and any bit of evidence that any of the royals can find on this matter, etc. Any evidence that they can obtain to say, well, yes, we are descended from the House of David, they are looking for. I think that better suits, the alleged Habsburg interest in the area.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So now, Sauniere died in 1917. Was that right?
Mm-hmm.
Was it 1917? And he fell ill, of course, on January 17th, which is a big day in this mystery. It's the Blue Apples Day, where at high noon on January 17th each year, the sun hits the window just at the right spot, and these blue sort of balls of light are reflected onto the wall. And of course, there's a whole mystery of these scrolls and things that were found, and the phrase midday blue apples and all that. Now, do you have any ideas on, that January 17th date and why it seems to be so looming? And, every January 17th, I always notice it. And usually I get messages in Facebook wishing me a happy January 17th. But of course, he didn't die on that date. I think he lived for about a week or something like that afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And then he passed away. Now, he had a stroke, right? A cerebral hemorrhage or a stroke?
That old
way of dying.
That old chestnut. That seems to haunt everywhere. Yeah, I think it's the 22nd of January. In articulo mortis, at the moment of death. In other words, he is his suspension from the church is lifted. Last rite are given. In fact, by Jean Riviere of the Church at Esperanza.
Well, now that's another story, of course. He was a younger priest, Abbe Riviere, and he went to give, I guess, holy unction and last rites to Sauniere and hear his last confession. And they said he came out of the room ashen and was said to have never smiled again. That's the story.
I think the more I read about him, I don't think he ever did smile.
I was going to ask you, did you run across anything about Riviere?
Yeah.
That connected him to any of this?
Sauniere is removed from the priesthood, by the way. He's being investigated for everything from embezzlement, simony. The state is essentially
treason, probably
treason to accounts. Yes, he is reviled, and Riviere doesn't like him at all.
Oh.
They really do not see eye to eye.
Was he the only priest around that they could call on? I mean, interesting that they would have called on him.
From memory, from this few years back, there were a number of people who just wouldn't go near Sauniere. Wow. I mean, I put it this way: if he had been wealthy, it was assets, it wasn't cash, because I can absolutely demonstrate that Marie Denarno couldn't afford a coffin for him.
Oh my gosh.
So, when we realistically, when we're talking about, she had lots of money, she couldn't afford to pay for the coffin until the 12th of June, 1917.
Wow.
So 22nd of January, 12th of June. We need to lay to bed the idea that there was cash, as in physical cash.
Right. It was assets, I guess.
Yeah. So you can be incredibly wealthy. You could have Holbeins. You could have, jewelry, whatever else that's worth a lot, and be broke.
Mm.
It's only worth anything if you sell it. It really does see. I mean, Marie Denarno ended up remortgaging the house on so many occasions that when Noel Corbu, who then turns the Villa, the Villa de Marie,
he bought it from her.
He bought it and says you can stay here. I think there's a bit of sympathy. Well, he drums up a lot.
Oh no, I don't know that it was sympathy necessarily. It might have been. I mean, there might have been that, but then there was also the fact that, people thought Marie knew something.
And I think she did. I mean, look,
and she said she did, and apparently had, promised to tell him. And then she had a stroke and couldn't speak and then died.
If you had any evidence that, I don't know, the priest was committing treason, he was writing against the Republic, he was instigating rebellion, he was supporting someone who had attempted a coup, he was refusing to pay taxes. The joyride, if you will, of this money flowing his way is somewhat tampered by when Biard dies. And I think he has a heart attack and stroke. He's incapacitated and then replaced by a bishop who's very much on behalf of the state. Churches are taken over by the state in response to Berenger. Still to this day, churches in France have the words République Française because of what was going on in this period. So you've got you put all of this together, and Marie Denarno, look, if she was burning anything, I don't want people listening to this and thinking, oh, it's just a naysayer or something like that, because it's not that. I'm open to the argument that Sauniere found stuff. In fact, we know from records that he found, tombs, Visigothic pillars and things like this. But there is evidence that he was engaging in treachery against the state. He probably didn't see it like that. He probably saw it as he was trying to save France. Now, you most certainly wouldn't want that going into the hands of anyone, especially in 1946, for example, when the alleged burning took place, whereby France has been brutally occupied by the Nazis. To this day, villages and towns are bitterly divided about the role that some of their inhabitants played in this time. So, would you want then, as people are having to get used to new currency, a fourth republic now, and a lot of the trials and a lot of investigations into people's activities against the state, would you really want to have a lot of paperwork of notes and forged letters and evidence of cash that you've paid no tax on and probably illegally got from other states? I would suggest the last thing you would want the new government to do is to grab hold of that.
Right.
And so it might make sense, if you were engaged in, I'm not going to make too much more of a comment, but I'm sure everyone listening to this will know what I mean when I say when people have attempted coups or any form of treason, burning documents or shredding them, for example, is usually what happens.
Yeah, that's true.
A short time after. And if you follow my meaning, I just want to say one thing, just on the death certificate of Sauniere, if I might.
Yeah.
And here's what it says: on the 22nd day of January, and we can read it in French if you'd like. In the year 1917, at 11 o'clock in the morning, Francois Berenger Sauniere, born at Montezel in the canton of Coise, on the 11th day of April 1852, son of Joseph Sauniere and Marguerite Hughes, bachelor, died at his home in Rennes-le-Chateau. Drawn up on the 23rd day of January 1917 at 11 o'clock in the morning on the declaration of Pierre Captier, 59 years of age, farmer residing in this commune, neighbour of the deceased, and of Louis Bousquet, 45 years of age, a stonemason residing in this commune, friend of the deceased, who, the death certificate having been read over, was both signed along with me, Victor Riviere, the mayor of Rennes-le-Chateau. That's what his death certificate says. Quite what killed him off, whether it was a stroke or whatever it is, not too sure. I would also just one last thing about the selling of masses. During wars, we started the show talking just briefly about Ukraine. There's something else just to think about. In times of war, people will beg priests and religious officials to pray for them because they can't attend church. They can't do any of this. If you're religious, this is obviously. And this was the case in the outbreak of the First World War in 1914. And there may have been people who were paying Sauniere in this period to pray for, their sons on the front line.
Yeah.
The next bit for me to look at, how can I put it? The next bit of evidence that I'm due to look at is going to support that. I've already had a little look, namely there's a letter of investigation of him doing this, even though he's not a priest. But yeah, I just want to bring new information, if you will. It occurred to me, as we come into the end of the show, there's far more, exactly what we'd said off air. There's far more information for me to go into. But just bringing a little bit of reality to the situation.
And like you said, something new, some new information. I know when we set out to do the Bloodline documentary, that was our raison d'etre, was just to add to the conversation, just put something out there, because there hadn't really been anything offered up that was really new since 1982 in the publication of Holy Blood, Holy Grail. Everyone sort of seized on that, as well they should have, I guess, and investigated and expanded upon those ideas. But there was no new evidence of any kind. And that's what we really set out to do, was just to spark the conversation again. And that's what I like about bringing in these new facts. Well, they're old facts, but new to us. And, it paints a clearer picture. It allows you to, put yourself more in the time and realize what was going on that might have been an explanation for a lot of things.
The notion of him building a house. I mean, look, it's 1909, and he's found guilty of embezzlement, and there's major spats between, the Pope, for example, had previously been saying, get rid of the Republic, that changes, that kind of thing. But I think the original idea was, let's show wealth. This is what the monarchy or the ancient regime could offer to everyone, a bit of wealth. But actually it begins to backfire, I would suggest, because, the discussion of money in the church, for those people who could remember what it was like in the old regime, where people were starving and farming land for food that they never got to eat. For those who remembered it, looking at wealth and looking at money that is been embezzled by a very old institution in the church probably didn't go down too well with a lot of folk. Either way, from people I've spoke to in the village with long memories, the one thing we can say is Sauniere leaves a divided legacy. For the locals, there were those who were friends with him and broadly supported what he ended up doing, which is renovated certainly the abandoned market square that had been there for centuries, but he gave it a new lease of life, to the alternative, which is for those who who had been told stories of having to leave school, their first bit of education. I mean, we talking certainly in my family of and with others, the first person in the family who went to university. This is a great thing. Cast your mind back to Sauniere's time. A lot of people who were going to school, that was the first time anyone in their family had gone to a school to learn, and all of this. So for those who are interrupted by his antics and these fake letter writing, he remains quite a divisive force, to say the least. For people today who everything from blowing up underground cave entrances and all of this, to the point that, by the way, I'll just say this. Please don't take any explosives to Rennes-le-Chateau. There were signs everywhere, but I will just say... Well,
there are also signs that say no digging, so don't take a shovel either.
There was someone who I think back in the 50s or very early 60s had used some TNT to blow up
person.
What they thought was access to where the treasure was. Unfortunately, having had a little bit to drink in the morning, had fell asleep and then lost track of the time. So when at the church they were trying to bury someone and the explosion went off, well, suddenly Grandma leaps out of the coffin due to the explosive force. And what an exciting funeral that was.
Wow. Yeah, we got a suggestion for a show here from Kathy. She says, something to ponder for another show. What do you think of the possibility that Portuguese Templars made it to Oak Island? Well, I don't know if they made it to Oak Island, but there certainly are some interesting Templar stories from Portugal.
My mind goes to Henry the Navigator straight away with that. Remember in Portugal, Kathy? It was Kathy.
It's Kathy.
Hi, Kathy. Don't forget, in Portugal, the Templars were never disbanded. They just simply had a name change to the Order of Christ. So they continued for quite some time. In fact, it's still
Portugal.
Portugal, indeed. So
Absolutely.
It's possible. But why Oak Island? Why not, I don't know, Florida or somewhere else?
Yeah. Why not L.A.? Did the Templars come to L.A.?
They're still on the way. They're stuck in traffic, Renee.
They're on the freeway.
Been stuck in 800 years with the traffic.
Since we're sort of winding down on a light note here, I did want to say, give a little shout out to Miss Tanya, Tanya DeSarno, who is watching the show with her group. I guess she has a Rennie group going. And we just wanted to give her a special shout out and a thank you for getting your group together to watch. And thank everybody for watching. My goodness.
And listening.
And listening. And some people are just listening. But yeah, it's been great. And I'm always game, to talk about Rennes-le-Chateau and in that area of France. I'm very excited because I'm going to be heading over shortly. And for those who have noticed that not much has been going on our website, I'm going to make a commitment right now. James and I have decided to set aside 2 days from my holiday to work on the website. So we're going to get some things up there for you, and some articles of friends and other guests that we've had on. So should be fun and interesting. And if you have anything you want to submit to us for the website, if it works with our platform and all that, send it on. Send it to info@newrennies.org. So,
and if any of you want to drop an email with any questions from history, I'm not going to promise I can give you.
Tanya. Tanya's in the chat room.
Hi, Tanya.
Hi, Tanya. She's my buddy. I mean, she's been listening for many years. Many years. We won't admit how many, Tanya.
Have we really been talking for years now? It felt like
yeah, we've been talking for years just tonight. But also, real quick, we've only got like 1 minute or less. Any updates from Ukraine and the efforts? The
medical convoy has arrived and been distributed. There's another convoy going not next week, but the week after.
Wonderful. And do send all your best wishes and your prayers to those people in Ukraine that have been displaced. Some are still trapped there. They were just living their lives and war hit them over the head. So let's all put our positive thoughts and prayers their way.
It's a peace.
Yes, and to peace.
Thanks for having me, everyone. I wish you all a good morning, evening, or night, whatever it is.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.